Committee on Citizenship and Immigration for committee business in order. Sorry, we don't have the gravel today, so I will just be verbally speaking. So I request all individuals present in this room to please follow public health advice, follow physical distancing, wear a mask, and if you are sitting on your chair, then you can take off. But if you are going out or walking around, so please make sure that everyone wears a mask. We all have to follow those. So this is a hybrid meeting. Some members are present here in the parliamentary precinct and other members are appearing remotely. Just want to remind all members, please speak at a pace slow enough for interpreters to keep up, because in the last meeting we were having problems of interpretation. So do not speak over one another, just to provide the interpreters the opportunity that they have time to translate. The clerk is attending virtually and is tracking raised hands and keeping a list. Pursuant to the order adopted by the House on September 23rd, all questions shall be decided by a recorded vote, except for those decided unanimously or on division. So all the votes will be recorded. The meeting is being webcast and is available on PAL View. In regards to the calendar, the clerk has distributed a calendar of possible meetings. The meeting schedule is determined by all whips, by the whips of all the parties. So based on the present situation, we will have one meeting on October 27th, meeting number 3, as of week of 9th, as of week 2nd of November, there can be possible 2 meetings or 1 meeting per week. That will be based on the agreements the whips agree on. So after today's meeting, there can be 10 meetings if we have 2 meetings after next week, or 6 meetings. So based on that, we will develop our calendar. In addition to that, I just want to let everyone know that if we decide on a study to be undertaken, for everyone's information, the distribution of witnesses is based on the proportion of the committee members. So that will be based on the seats we have: 50% Liberal, 30% Conservative, 10% Bloc, and 10% NDP. So if the committee agrees to commence a study, then please make sure that all the parties submit their witness list to the clerk, including witnesses' contact information and the order of priority, not later than 4 p.m. Monday, October 26, provided that the clerk will contact Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada to send officials to appear on Tuesday, October 27th, if we start the meeting. All witnesses will appear remotely. So no witnesses can be here in person. All the witnesses which we decide will have to appear remotely. I also want to remind members that Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada has offered to appear remotely and provide the committee with a briefing session on department's mandate and activities. It is up to the will of all the members if they want to have a complete meeting for that, or the other option is, if everyone agrees, we can have an informal meeting, and that can be arranged based on everyone's availability. So that will be up to the members to make a decision. Going back now where we left, at the time of the adjournment of the last meeting, the committee was debating the motion of Ms. Dancho to study the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the immigration system, and the amendment of Mr. Dhaliwal to amend the motion in paragraph 1. The text of the motion and the amendment are published in the minutes of meeting number 1. So with that, these were some of the things I wanted to remind all the members. With that, I will open the floor for the meeting today. Mr. Dhaliwal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, as you see that the CP Conservative Party motion is on the floor and my amendment is on the floor, so I would like to move to withdraw my amendments on the CPC motion.
Thank you, Mr. Dhaliwal. I would need unanimous consent for that. So, do I have the unanimous consent in regards to Mr. Dhaliwal's proposal of withdrawing his amendment?
Yes.
All yea? No objection? Okay. Thank you. So the motion is, the amendment is withdrawn by Mr. Dhaliwal. Yes, Mr. Dhaliwal, you wanted to say something?
No, it's already done. I mean, so now we can.
Yes, so we are back now. Yes, so thank you, Mr. Dhaliwal. We are back on the motion, which was proposed by Ms. Dancho.
So,
Ms. Martinez-Farada?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that there might be other discussions within this committee, and I would like to propose an adjournment of the debate on the motion presented by the Conservative members.
Ms. Martinez-Farada has proposed to adjourn the debate. Clerk, would we have to go into a recorded vote?
We need to have
Yes.
a motion to adjourn the debate is agreed to unanimously or on division.
Okay, so do we have the unanimous consent of all to adjourn the debate on Ms. Dancho's motion? Any opposition? Okay. So we have the unanimous consent to adjourn the debate on Ms. Dancho's motions. So the debate on that motion is adjourned. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to move the motion that's in my name and notice has been given to committee members that the committee invite the Minister of Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship and department officials for 2 hours to provide a briefing to committee members on the impact of the pandemic on immigration, refugee and citizenship staffing levels and the ability to process all immigration and refugee streams locally and abroad. Speaking to this motion just very briefly, Madam Chair, to clarify, the motion calls for the officials and the minister to come before committee for 2 hours. That's a total of 2 hours. So that would mean 1 hour for the minister and 1 hour for officials.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan has proposed her motion. See no one to debate. Yes, Mr. Regan.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say that, my experience has been generally that we see ministers at committees about twice a year. However, the government does know how important it is for ministers to be accountable and to discuss the files that are before them. And of course, the government's made a number of changes to make sure the Canadians can be safe during this period, but also it's important that we hear about these issues related to immigration. So I intend to support this motion.
Ms. Dancho.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with MP Reagan, and Jenny Kwan's motion is excellent. And I think given the pandemic and this sort of once-in-a-century health and economic crisis, it's very important that we have the Minister of Immigration come to committee as soon as possible to give the Committee of Immigration an update on the state of immigration, the many streams, and as the member has outlined in her motion, the ability to process all immigration and refugee streams locally and abroad. So I very much support Ms. Kwan's motion.
Thank you, Mr. Surrey.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je voulais juste faire ça.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to make sure I understand. If we adopt the motion because the minister came last July, and we would like to invite him once again, but is he going to come back once again? I don't remember the French word for the subs and means. Is he going to come back for that? Or is it a duplication? Do we want the minister to come back for the estimates? And we agree to invite as many witnesses as possible. So I just wanted to clarify this point regarding the motion.
Normandine.
Peut-être pour faire...
To speak to what my colleague just said, my understanding is that this testimony by the minister has to do with the pandemic. How did it go at the minister? What were the obstacles? The number of employees that had to stay home and the material they got at home. So this is very specific to the pandemic. It's not mutually exclusive.
Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have the opportunity to deal with many ministers for over the many years, particularly when it comes to immigration. And this ministry is a very key in many ridings, including in the Lower Mainland, where I and Jenny Kwan comes from, and I'm sure the other is too in other parts of the country as well. And Minister is very enthusiastic, always willing to have a conversation with members. This is a good motion, and I'm sure Minister will be very happy to appear, and I would support this motion as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dhaliwal. Martinez Farada.
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. As my colleague, Mrs. Normandin, was explaining, I do understand that this is a very unique situation given the pandemic. Even with regards to immigration, we've taken actions that have contributed in assisting immigration cases during the pandemic, and this was extremely difficult. I think that it's worthwhile to hear what immigration has been doing to fight against the pandemic and also to help immigration's files move forward. So I am in complete agreement that the minister and others can come and testify as to how they have managed through the pandemic. I'd like to remind people that it's not unusual for the minister to come more than once. It's not usual. It's not normal for the minister. It's not a usual thing for the minister to come as often. I do realize that. I want to make sure that we give an opportunity to witnesses to testify, and also that we make room for the studies that have to be undertaken. I want all the MPs to understand that we do need to hear witnesses so that we can go forward with immigration files. So I am in favor of the motion.
Thank you. We have Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair. I want to thank all the committee members who spoke in support of this motion. I think it is important, as outlined, that because we're in unprecedented times with the pandemic, and really to have the minister and officials come to tell us what is going on with IRCC. While they've made some measures with some of the programming, there's still a lot of gaps in terms of problems that are existing. So it'd be really good for committee members to understand what is the situation, and then we can determine how best to go forward in providing studies that has impacted the immigration and refugee citizenship portfolio. So this is not meant to replace the minister coming before the committee on levels, for example, on immigration levels numbers, or on immigration on the budget, but rather, because of the pandemic, I think it's important for the committee to get a update and get the lay of the land from the minister and officials on where things are at.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. We have next Mr. Reagan on the list.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Ms. Kwan just covered it because she mentioned the fact that the minister's plan is going to be coming on the mains, the subs, and the mains and the levels. So that's 2 times already that he's coming. But she's covered that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one on the further list, so we have a motion moved by Ms. Kwan that the committee invite the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship and department officials for 2 hours to provide a briefing to committee members on the impact of the pandemic on immigration, refugees and citizenship staffing levels, and the ability to process all immigration and refugee streams locally and abroad. So, Clerk, can we have a recorded vote, please?
Yes. The question is on the motion by Ms. Kwan. Mr. Dhaliwal. If you could please unmute and say yay or nay.
Yay. I support this motion. Yes.
Ms. Dillon. Yay. Madame Martinez-Ferrada.
Je supporte la motion.
Mr. Reagan.
Yes.
Monsieur Serret. Monsieur Serret.
Ouais, serré, Charret, OK. Je cherchais pour M. Charret. En faveur, s'il vous plaît.
For the motion.
Mr. Allison.
I support the motion.
Ms. Dancho.
I support the motion.
Mr. Hallen.
I support the motion.
Mr. Soroya.
I support the motion.
Madame Normandin.
Je vote pour la...
I support the motion.
I support the motion.
The result is 11 yeas, 0 nays.
Good. So the motion is passed. Ms. Dancho.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just upon reflection of our first committee meeting, and very much looking to work as a team and deal with the many very difficult and sensitive immigration issues we have, we've revamped and refocused the motion from last committee meeting to be more specific as we received the feedback from the last committee. So I would like to put forward that motion now. That pursuant to Standing Order 108, Section 2, the committee commence a study to examine the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic on Canada's immigration system, and that this study evaluate, review, and examine issues relevant to this issue, including the following. A, application backlogs and processing times for the different streams of family reunification and the barriers preventing the timely reunification of loved ones, such as denials of temporary resident visas because of Section 179B of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations and the ongoing closures of visa application centers. B, examine the government's decision to reintroduce a lottery system for the reunification of parents and grandparents, to compare it to previous iterations of application processes for the stream of family reunification, including a review of processing times and the criteria required for successful sponsorship. And C, temporary resident visa (TRV) processing delays faced by international students in securing TRVs, particularly in Francophone Africa, authorization to travel to Canada by individuals with an expired confirmation of permanent residency, use of expired security, medical, and background checks for permanent immigration. That the committee hold at least 8 meetings to hear from witnesses, that the committee report to its findings to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a comprehensive response thereto.
Thank you, Ms. Tancho. Ms. Normandine.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. I already told my colleague that one of my fears with regards to a motion, a general motion for study, is that we might find ourselves with an insufficient amount of time for more specific types of studies that will be necessary. Given the pandemic, and all the parties have their priorities as to what's important to study, I think that family reunification is a consensus. I'd like to make an amendment to the proposal and I'm going to read this in French. I have the translation, but the interpreter does not have the translation. So I'm going to read the amendment, and I'm open to all suggestions. I suggest that the study begin at the latest on October 27th. I'm flexible on the date, that this study be held on a minimum of 2, maximum of 4 sessions, that the witnesses are able to testify on one or several of the issues in the motion, that the testimony be held during this current legislature, and subsequent studies will deal with issues similar to that of this motion. The idea is that if we decide, before deciding on very specific issues, if we decide to do a broader study, to make sure that they don't take up too much time, but to make sure that the testimony received will be useful and it won't be time lost. This is a suggestion that I'm making a proposal of an amendment, but I'm open to sub-amendments to my amendment.
The amendment? Clerk, would it be possible to pass it on to all the members, the amendment which has been proposed by Ms. Normandine?
We'll be in touch with her office now to request an electronic copy of the English and French, and we'll distribute it right away.
Thank you. Martinez Farada. Now we have amendment as proposed by Ms. Normandine on the floor. Ms. Martinez Farada.
Thank you. Would it be possible, the way that my colleague presented these amendments, well, do we have to vote on all of this, or will this vote, well, can it be 3 different amendments? What is the procedure?
An amendment which has been proposed by Ms. Normandine, so we will have to vote on that amendment. We have next on the speaking list, Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Okay. Yes. With respect to the amendment, if I heard the amendment correctly, the suggestion is to reduce the number of meetings from up to 8 meetings to 2 to 4 meetings. Did I hear the member correctly? So we're studying 3 topics, 3 substantive topics. One with respect to the family reunification streams, particularly the impact of issues such as denials of temporary residence visas because of Section 179B, and the closures of visa application centers, and so on. So that's a substantive study, because the family reunification stream, particularly for spousal sponsorship, has been gravely impacted. This is a piece that I've been wanting for the committee to study, in fact, and I'm glad that is before us in this motion, in this format. So so that's one aspect. The other piece is the examination of the lottery system. You know, it was very mystifying to me that when the minister came out and announced the lottery system after 10 months of putting it on ice, to only go back to the failed lottery system. So I'm very interested in understanding what the decision was behind that. And then, of course, to compare that system to other iterations of the parents, grandparents reunification stream. And then the last component of this is to study the delays for international students, which is also a significant component as well. So I'm very worried that 2 to 4 meetings would be deficient in doing justice to all of these issues. I get it that we don't want to consume all of the time before the committee for studies, because there are many areas to which we want to study, but I am quite concerned that 2 to 4 meetings is not really going to be able to do it. And keeping in mind as well, with those 2 to 4 meetings, there's also the component to which we have to deliberate on the report writing as well. So, so with respect to the suggestion of the original motion, where it is up to 8 meetings, it does not mean to say committees would have to take all 8 meetings, but it's up to 8 meetings. And if we think about it, for each of the substantive piece, A, B, and C within the motion, if we spend 2 meetings on each topic, you know, it gives us 6 meetings. And then, of course, there'll be at least 1 meeting to which we have to do the report on. So that's 7 meetings. So that's sort of what I'm thinking about. So I'm quite worried that 2 to 4 meetings is not going to give us sufficient time to deal with all these substantive issues.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. We have speaking list. So next is Ms. Martinez Farada. Martinez Farada.
Oui, merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to support what the opposition members have said on this issue. I believe this is an important issue, and I believe that my colleague will understand the question of family reunification. Many members have felt concern about this issue, and I believe that every impact in this motion would call for a separate study in itself. And I believe that to put them all together is very logical, and we should take the time to go through all the different elements, and 2 meetings would not be enough. This would not allow us to hear witnesses for every aspect, every file. So, as Ms. Kwan said, I will also not be able to support this issue of 2 to 4 meetings.
The next we have on the speaking list is Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, no, I was hearing Ms. Kwan's issue about PGP, parents and grandparents. In fact, when it comes to, let me first of all, I think under circumstances, we have to give Minister the credit that he and his department worked very hard to deal with these situations, where he has said that the department will process 50,000 applications by end of December, which is a very good move. And also, even though this lottery system, I will more agree with Ms. Kwan that it didn't work, but under circumstances, I think this is the best needle, at least to accept 10,000 applications. But this way, he has given us a window now too, from October 23rd all the way to November 3rd. So with this, we will have a whole list, complete list, how many applicants are out there that has expressed interest. From there, minus 10,000, we will be able to see how much volume is out there. Then we as committee members can come up with suggestions as well to the minister. How should the new system look like? So as when we accept those other 30,000 applications, those procedures are incorporated. So I would delay that meeting almost to the end after the November 3rd, so as we have those numbers handy. And I agree with we should have more meetings. Like I would like to bring another amendment if, we see the consensus that the study begin no later than October 27, 2020, that the committee hold no more than 8 meetings to hear from witnesses. I think that will satisfy Ms. Kwan, 7 meetings, and also Ms. Martinez Prada's proposal as well, and it will also include those 2 to 4 meetings. So basically, let me see if there is a
Thank you,
consent for
Mr.
this.
Dhaliwal. So you are proposing a sub-amendment to the amendment which was proposed by Ms. Normandine. Do you have the text of the sub-amendment?
I can read it, Madam, slowly.
Si vous me permettez, Madame la
If you would allow me, Madam Chair, I believe that this would be a new amendment and not a sub-amendment here.
In just 1 second, if the clerk can clarify, is it Mr. Dhaliwal has proposed an amendment to Ms. Normandine's amendment. So will this be a sub-amendment or?
Yes, if Mr. Dhaliwal proposes a modification to the amendment that was moved by Madame Normandin, then that is a sub-amendment, and provided it remains within the scope of Madame Normandin's amendment, then the sub-amendment would be in order.
So we have a sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal on the floor. And going on to the speaking list, we have Mr. Ellison. Mr. Ellison.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I would agree with Mr. Dhaliwal that if he would like to propose a sub-amendment to look at 8 meetings, I think that would make some sense. We should have enough time to get everything done before Christmas, as was laid out by the calendar. We've got another 7 meetings just until the end of November, and then we still have a couple of weeks in December. So that also gives us a chance to possibly wrap up a report in the meantime. So I would just say that I think that what Mr. Dhaliwal says seems to make some sense.
Thank you, Mr. Ellison. We have next on the list, speaking list, Mr. Surrey. Mr. Surrey.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Maybe a friendly amendment to Ms. Normandie, but before, I'd like to ask the clerk, just procedural-wise, because I was looking through the motions that were submitted to us prior to the meeting, and I can't see the amendment here. And I know the clerk mentioned he'll get in touch with Madame Normandie's office and then circulate by email, but in person in the House, I'm not sure about the rules or procedures these days, but can we get a copy here physically, or I just want to make sure what we're reading. So that just one part there. But the other component, Madame Normandie, peut-être que si...
And perhaps, Ms. Normandin, well, you mentioned that you might be open to certain changes or proposals. So would you be willing to withdraw the part about 2 to 4 meetings, and perhaps Mr.
Sub-amendment which has been proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal on the floor.
Mm-hmm. But if we just remove
First of all, we have to deal with that sub-amendment before we go into the amendment which was proposed by Ms. Normandine. So right now we have the sub-amendment which has been proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal on the floor. So we have next on the speaking list, Ms. Tancho.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Sore's plan actually suits Mr. Dhaliwal's quite well. I think they're two in the same a little bit, and I do appreciate Madame Normandin's suggestions. The start date, very important. We nail that down today. I see no problem with that. And bringing forward evidence we learned in this study and future studies, I think makes good sense. Why reinvent the wheel every time? But I do believe that 8 meetings would be a good amount. I know in my amendment or my motion I said at least 8, so I would be willing to say 8 maximum. I think that's fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Martinez-Farada.
Oui, merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as what my colleague said, I would like to support the sub-amendment proposed by my colleague. As I said earlier, I believe that we will need that many meetings to be able to address all the different issues contained in this motion. And I also agree with my colleague, Ms. Normandin, regarding being able to use this testimony or this evidence for future studies. And I agree with the start date as well. But what is an issue is the number of meetings here. So I would agree with this sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal here.
Ms. Normandine.
Just to clarify what I had in mind, at the beginning I said 2 to 4 meetings, but I did not mean to finish everything in 4 sessions. I just thought that we could have later studies. So we could have a general study first, but there seems to be consensus here. All committee members seem to be willing to already do a study in depth and not a general study. So in that regard, I see no problem going with how many meetings? 8 meetings? So I would also support this sub-amendment.
We have the sub-amendment which has been proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal that we start the study on the motion moved by Ms. Dencho not later than October 27th and have at least made 8 meetings. So I don't have the text. Mr. Dhaliwal, is this the sub-amendment you are proposing?
Oui.
Okay. So
yes.
Seeing no one on the speakers list, can we have a recorded vote on the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal
Point of order. Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Reagan.
Madam Chair, I wonder if we need a recorded vote, because of course, if in the event that we're all agreed, we do not need a recorded vote, I believe.
I will pass it to the clerk to clarify. Do we?
Yes. All votes must be recorded except where the committee is unanimously agreed or on division.
Okay, so do we have the unanimous consent on the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal? All those in favor, we have the unanimous consent? Okay, so the sub-amendment which has been proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal is passed. So we are now back.
We have to vote on.
Yes, so we are now back on the amendment which was proposed by Ms. Normandine as amended by the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal. And we have Ms. Normandine on the list.
Juste pour votre information, ça vient d'arriver dans vos courriels.
You just got it in your inbox.
You have sent the amendment?
Les greffiers.
The clerks have sent the amendment to your emails.
It. I have not received the amendment, so I would ask Ms. Normandine to please read your amendment as amended by the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal.
Alors, avec le sous-amendement, ça donnerait.
So that this study begin no later than October 27, 2020, that this study be held over a maximum of 8 meetings, unless I'm wrong, that the witnesses called as part of this study be allowed to testify on one or more of the issues in this motion, that the evidence gathered during this study be deemed to have also been given during subsequent studies to be held during this Parliament, provided that the subsequent studies deal with issues similar to those in this motion.
Ms. Martinez-Farada?
Juste une clarification sur le sous-amendement qu'on vient d'adopter, à savoir que c'est un maximum de 8. Dans la lecture que Mme Normandin vient de faire, c'est pas le mot qui a été utilisé. Est-ce que c'est possible de le...
No translation.
The interpreter apologizes. She was on the wrong channel. Testing, testing, 1, 2.
Translation? Good. Yes, Ms. Martinez Farada, if you can please repeat.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that the word that is to be used regarding the number of sittings was a maximum of 8.
At least 8. We're talking not more than 8. Je veux juste m'assurer que les mots sont bien compris.
I just wanted to make sure we were using the right language. I said a maximum of 8, unless I'm wrong, but
The sub-amendment which was proposed by Mr. Dhaliwal, that not more than 8. So we have Ms. Kwan on the list. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much. No, I'm fine. That was the point of clarification. It was up to 8 meetings. So I think we've clarified that. Thank you.
So we have the amendment as amended by Mr. Dhaliwal, proposed by Ms. Normandine. So do we have the unanimous consent to move with this amendment, or is any, we have the unanimous consent, so the amendment as amended by Mr. Dhaliwal is moved. So we are now back to the motion which has been proposed by Ms. Dancho and amended by the amendment proposed by Ms. Normandine. Seeing, yes, Ms. Dancho.
Madame Dancho.
We can, but I do hope that all members of the committee will support this motion, that we can get to work very quickly as soon as next Tuesday, working for the folks that are separated from their families and many other issues that we've outlined in the motion. They're very critical that we commence these studies soon, and I would very much appreciate the support of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martinez Farada.
We
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we talked very quickly about this motion, so I would like to reiterate the issues that were important in this motion. Family reunification. Maybe I would like to make sure with the members of the committee, well, I hope that they will support this motion unanimously so that we can get to work and quickly discuss with the witnesses and people we would like to have in the context of this study. Personally, about family reunification, you know that there is a lot of rallying around this issue. Even the House received a petition. So there are a lot of issues about this that require a quick and specific attention. So you have my full support to move this issue forward because it's very important to me. As for the lottery and the TFWP program, IDP program, sorry, I'm very pleased that we can spend some time on this issue and make things as good as possible for people who benefit from this program. As for visitors and foreign students, with this pandemic, it's the second wave, I would say, and the border issues won't be solved very quickly, and we will still have several months ahead of us in this situation. So the interest for students in our universities, we should be able to find quicker solutions. So we've already done a lot, but I think that this issue is very important, not only for the economy, education, but also for the economic recovery of our country. So here again, you will have my full support.
Seeing no further one wanting to speak on this motion, I'm just waiting for the clerk to incorporate the amendment which has been moved. So I will read the amended motion before we go into the vote. So the clerk is just working on the amended motion. So I will read the motion as amended, that pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, the committee commence a study to examine the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic on Canada's immigration system, and this study evaluate, review, and examine issues relevant to this situation, including the following: application backlogs and processing times for the different streams of family reunification and the barriers preventing the timely reunification of loved ones, such as denials of temporary resident visas because of Section 179B of the Immigration and Refugees Protection Regulations and the ongoing closures of visa application centers. B. Examine the government's decision to reintroduce a lottery system for the reunification of parents and grandparents to compare it to previous iterations of application processes for this stream of family reunification, including a review of processing time and the criteria required for the successful sponsorship. C. Temporary resident visa, TRV processing delays faced by international students in securing TRVs, particularly in Francophone Africa, authorization to travel to Canada by individuals with an expired confirmation of permanent residency, use of expired security, medical, and background checks for permanent immigration. That this study began no later than October 27, 2020, that this study be held over a maximum of 8 meetings, that the witnesses called as part of this study be allowed to testify on one or more of the issues in this motion, that the evidence gathered during this study be deemed to have also been given during subsequent studies to be held during this Parliament, provided that the subsequent studies deal with issues similar to those in this motion. So can we please go to the recorded vote?
Ask if there is unanimous. Madam Chair, could you ask if there is unanimous consent?
Clerk, can we ask for the unanimous consent on this motion? Okay, so do we have the unanimous consent? Great. So we have the unanimous consent. So the motion, as read by me, the motion moved by Ms. Dencho as amended, and the sub-amendment moves. Great. Ms. Martinez-Farada. Yes, Ms. Martinez-Farada.
Oui, merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize once again because I don't have a lot of experience within committees, since we have a committee that is going to review this motion next week. I was wondering whether the present committee could become a subcommittee to be able to discuss this motion, and how are we going to approach the witness issue? And so could I make an amendment or an official proposal?
Has passed. The motion which was the
Oui,
move.
ça je comprends, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, I understand, Madam Chair, but my question is, once the motion is passed, can we ask for the adjournment of the business of the committee and to work as a subcommittee to work on the agenda of the study of the motion that has just been passed? So it's an official proposal. Is it possible?
I ask the clerk to clarify what Ms. Martinez-Ferrada has proposed.
Oui, je pense que j'ai.
Yes, I think I understood her question. Normally, before summoning a subcommittee meeting, before convening a meeting, it takes a notice of meeting. Normally, committees don't transform a standing committee into a subcommittee. However, I could speak to technical teams, and maybe you have the option to adjourn the meeting and to give a notice to convene a subcommittee meeting with the time that is left today. According to the whip's order, to the order adopted by the whip, so the procedure adopted by the whip, the committee could hold a subcommittee meeting, but it has to be according to the order that was adopted. So we just have today and the 27th, but we still have 1 hour left.
Mr. Reagan.
Madam Chair, my question is, generally speaking, of course, we always hear that, and I may have said it on occasion, that the committees are the masters of their own house. Is it assuming that I don't know if there would be unanimous consent for this, but in the event that there were unanimous consent, do those difficulties still apply?
And I think, my proposal to all the committee members would be that we have moved the motion and we have to start the study on that motion as of October 27th. And as I said in the opening remarks, that the clerk can be in touch with the IRCC officials to kickstart the first meeting, and we can submit the list of the witnesses to the clerk no later than 4 p.m. on Monday, October 26th, provided that everyone can send in and we can start the study with the officials on October 27th.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Madam Chair, my point of order, what I'm really saying is that Madame Martinez-Perrada, right, has proposed that the committee adjourn and that there immediately be a meeting of the subcommittee on agenda, those members who are on it, to work out some of these details. And my question is that not possible with unanimous consent, or does it require a very short time, I assume, perhaps 5 minutes to give the notice to the members officially? I would have thought that you could do this by unanimous consent, but what do I know about such matters?
And Madam Chair, I don't always agree with my liberal colleagues. I don't always agree with my liberal colleagues, but I'm going to agree with Jeff on this one. Very, very easily, you guys could go into subcommittee if that's what the committee decides, if everyone's okay with it. You have unanimous consent. And I would suggest, in order to not burn another meeting date, because we're limited with our meetings, that the subcommittee have a chance to have a conversation now to try and organize the thought process for us and get things started. So,
Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair. I don't have a problem going to a subcommittee. However, I was hoping to move one additional motion, and there was a motion that in our last meeting with the larger motion that has now been adjourned was incorporated into a potential study, and this is a motion with respect to having the committee study the safe haven to the people of Hong Kong facing persecution under the national security law. So I was hoping to move that motion so that we can put that into the mix.
So you want to move the motion now?
Yeah, so why don't I quickly do it, because that was something that the committee members supported last time. So I thought that maybe we can quickly just look at this motion and hopefully get it passed. So the motion would read that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee
Wants
undertake a
to
study.
clarify something? Ms. Kwan, just 1 second. You wanted to clarify something? Can she move the motion now?
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Were you speaking to me?
Yes, were you trying to say something? Okay, sorry. Yes, Ms. Kwan.
Sorry, okay, so I'll just read out my motion. So I move the following motion that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study to examine special immigration and refugee measures in order to provide a safe haven to the people of Hong Kong facing persecution under the new national security law. And the committee report its findings to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a comprehensive response thereto. I think that there's urgency to this matter. I'm raising this at this point simply because at the last committee meeting, I had moved an amendment to the large motion that Ms. Denko had put before us, and it was supported by committee members. So I'd like to move this motion, and then after which I'm happy to go into subcommittee.
Ms. Martinez-Farada?
Oui, effectivement.
Yes, Madam Chair. We supported Mrs. Kwan's motion with regards to Hong Kong and the refugees. So once again, we are favorable to the motion. I would like to obtain the support of Mrs. Kwan to be able to work on the agenda of the committee that's coming. So could I ask a vote on the motion presented by Mrs. Kwan?
Just 1 second. Can I ask the clerk to clarify, can we go into further debate or we have to vote on this motion?
No, the debate continues until it collapses. However, if no other members wish to speak, then you may put the question on the motion.
We have Ms. Tencho on the list.
I'm just a bit confused, Madam Chair. Maybe the clerk can clarify. Was Ms. Martinez-Farada's, was that a motion? And then, is this a new motion to that motion? I'm just not quite sure what Ms. Farada had put forward in the first. She wanted to go to subcommittee, but was that a motion? And can you propose another motion at that time? I'm just not clear what's happening.
The motion on the floor proposed by Ms. Kwan, so we have the debate happening on that motion.
Ms. Farada did not put a motion to go to subcommittee. That wasn't.
No.
Okay.
Mr. Dhaliwal, you wanted to speak?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I'm okay.
Seeing no further debate, so we have a motion, and I will, as proposed by Ms. Kwan. So let me read this motion, and then we can go into a vote.
Madam Chair, ask if there's a unanimous consent for this motion by Ms. Kwan. So otherwise, we don't need a recorded vote.
Thank you, Mr. Dhaliwal. We have the motion moved by Ms. Kwan that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study to examine special immigration and refugee measures in order to provide a safe haven to the people of Hong Kong facing persecution under the new national security law, and the committee reports its finding to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a comprehensive response thereto. Do I have the unanimous consent to move this motion? Great. We have the unanimous consent to move this motion. Thank you. And we have Ms. Norma Dean on the list.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. I would like to take 5 minutes before we go into a subcommittee to deal with an issue. In one of the proposals for a study that I put, we're talking about foreign workers and the issue of impact studies on the labor market. During the last committee meeting, we started discussing about the if a study on the impact would be in order or not, a study on the impacts on the labor market, if this would be receivable or not. I would suggest that perhaps I can table my proposal simply to be able to ask the question to the clerk and to see if this is in order or not, and then adjourn the debate on my proposal. I just want it to be the object that the clerk is able to rule on this and to provide an answer later on, but it would clarify the point. Merci, Madame Normandin. Est-ce que vous proposez une motion? I'm explaining why. To be able to ask the question to the clerk, and then I would propose adjournment of the debate. So yes, I'm moving my motion. I can reread it.
Reprenne une étude sur les
That the committee conduct a study on the costs with regards to the impact on the labor market with regards to the temporary foreign worker program, and that during the study, the committee look at possible solutions that the open work permits be given according to sector in order to facilitate labor mobility, that the assessments be biannual, that the duration of the work visa be reviewed, that triennial, that the committee report on this and make recommendations to the House. I would like to know if eventually this is in order, if at the Immigration Committee can deal with work permits and impacts on the labor market.
Analyst to clarify if the motion moved by Ms. Normandine is under the mandate of CIMM. So if Julie can clarify on that. Yes. Yes, please.
So the committee has in the past studied temporary foreign workers and the LMIA. We do have the authority to invite ESDC to come as a witness and explain these programs. Is that clear?
Yes. Mr. Dhaliwal. You are on the mute. Can you please unmute yourself? Mr. Dhaliwal.
Madam Chair, I was thinking, the motion, after this, do we want to bring in the motion to adjournment the debate or to adjourn the meeting? That is what I wanted to clarify. Because if it's done, and as Ms. Kwan was saying earlier, that we adjourn the meeting and go into the subcommittee for the committee business.
Thank you, Mr. Dhaliwal. So we have the motion which has been moved by Ms. Normandine, and the analyst has provided the clarification on that.
Je propose l'ajournement du débat.
I move that the debate on my motion be adjourned.
Adjourned. Do I have the unanimous consent to adjourn the debate on the motion proposed by Ms. Normandine? Yes, please. Quick.
Can we suspend for 5 minutes between adjourning and starting the subcommittee? Or like not
We have
suspend,
not
but have
come-
a pause?
Well, yeah, first we have to go through this, and we have not come
That's
to
what I
that
mean.
whether we
Okay.
can have the subcommittee. So,
Madam Chair,
we-
I bring in the motion to adjourn the meeting right now.
1 second, where we have the question right now as put forward by Ms. Normandine, that the debate on the motion moved by her be adjourned. So do I have the unanimous consent? Okay, so the debate on that motion is adjourned.
So now I bring in the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Just 1 second, let me clarify with the clerk.
No.
Madam Chair, just a question.
We have the question on, so can I please ask the clerk that we have the question put forward by Mr. Dhaliwal. Do we need a recorded vote on that?
Not unless there's unanimity to adjourn the meeting.
Do we have the unanimous consent to adjourn the meeting? I'm asking for the unanimous consent. If we don't have the unanimous consent, we will have to go into a recorded vote.
Yes, I'll give my unanimous consent. I just have a procedural question before we vote on that.
Can I check with clerk? Can we go into a procedural question before we go into the unanimous consent?
Ordinarily, the only way to interrupt the vote on a motion to adjourn the meeting is to raise a point of order.
Point of order. A very friendly one.
Yes, please.
I just want to clarify. So we'll adjourn this and then we'll go right into subcommittee. And if that is the case, can we have a 5-minute recess in between adjournment and subcommittee today? Thank you.
If we have to go into a subcommittee, as per the clerk, we have to have 15 minutes. But anything passed in the subcommittee will have to come back to the full committee to adopt that. So I just want to clarify to the members. So,
Can I, Madam Chair, if I could just also, I guess, raise a point of order?
Yes,
mostly
please.
for technical clarification. And so when we adjourn this committee meeting and go into subcommittee, will this subcommittee be in camera or would it be on the public record? I just need a clarification on that.
The clerk can clarify based on the routine motions which we have passed in the last meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee adopted a routine motion in the first meeting that the committee may only meet in camera for the following purposes: to consider a draft report, to attend briefings concerning national security, to consider lists of witnesses, and for any other reason with the unanimous consent of the committee.
Perfect, thank you. So it will not be in camera. So thank you.
So we have the unanimous consent to adjourn the meeting. The meeting is adjourned, and I will clarify with the clerk that if we can move on to the subcommittee. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.